The stagecoach rattled to a stop in front of Cottonwood Springs, kicking up dust that swirled in the fading October light of 1875. Zachary Davis squinted against the setting sun, his weathered hat pulled low as he waited for the mail-order bride he'd sent for 3 months prior. When the door swung open, revealing a young woman in a tattered dress with only a small cloth bundle in her arms, he wondered if there'd been some mistake. Zelda Armstrong stepped down from the stagecoach, her legs trembling after the 5-day journey from St. Louis. Her blue dress, once her Sunday best, hung in tatters around her ankles, soiled from travel and misfortune. The promise of a new life with a stranger seemed less appealing now than when she'd responded to his advertisement, but she had nowhere else to go. Miss Armstrong. Zachary approached cautiously, removing his hat. His sandy hair caught the late afternoon light, and his eyes, a clear, steady blue, assessed her with concern rather than disappointment. "Yes, Mr. Davis?" She clutched her meager belongings tighter, suddenly aware of how she must appear. "I apologize for my condition. There was trouble on the journey," Zachary nodded, noticing the bruise on her cheek and the way she favored her right side. "No need for apologies. The journey west isn't kind to anyone." He extended a hand toward her bundle. "May I?" Reluctantly, she allowed him to take her only possessions, a spare chemise, a hairbrush with several broken teeth, and a small book of poetry, the pages water-stained and curling. "Is this all you have?" he asked, his voice soft enough that the stagecoach driver couldn't overhear. Zelda swallowed hard. "There was a robbery 2 days ago. They took my trunk." Zachary's expression darkened momentarily before he composed himself. "Well then, welcome to Wyoming territory, Miss Armstrong." He guided her toward a sturdy wagon, helping her climb onto the wooden seat. "My ranch is about an hour's ride from town." As they left Cottonwood Springs behind, Zelda studied her future husband from the corner of her eye. He wasn't what she'd expected. His letters had been straightforward, practical, a man of 32 with a small cattle ranch seeking a wife to share his life. He'd mentioned nothing of the kindness in his eyes or the gentle way his hands had helped her into the wagon. "You're quiet," Zachary observed as they traveled through the golden prairie grass, mountains rising in the distance. "I'm afraid you may be disappointed," Zelda admitted. "The woman you corresponded with had more to offer than just herself." Zachary's hands tightened on the reins. "I didn't send for a trunk of belongings, Miss Armstrong. I sent for you." They rode in silence for a while, the creaking of the wagon wheels and the steady rhythm of the horses' hooves the only sounds between them. Finally, a small ranch came into view, a sturdy log cabin with smoke curling from the stone chimney, a barn and several corrals. It wasn't grand, but it was well maintained. "It's not much," Zachary said as they approached, "but it's mine, paid for and proper." "It's lovely," Zelda replied honestly. After months of uncertainty and the terrifying journey west, the sight of the solid cabin felt like a promise. Zachary helped her down from the wagon, his hands strong and sure around her waist. "I know this isn't how either of us planned to begin. If you need time, we can delay the wedding. The preacher only comes through once a month, so we have 3 weeks to decide." Relief washed over her. "Thank you, Mr. Davis." "Zachary," he corrected gently. "If we're to live under the same roof, even temporarily, I reckon we should use our given names." "Zachary," she repeated, testing the name on her tongue. He led her to the cabin, opening the door to reveal a simple but comfortable interior, a stone fireplace with a fire already burning, a table with 4 chairs, a small kitchen area, and 2 doors leading to what she assumed were bedrooms. "The room on the right will be yours until—" "Well, until you decide if you want to stay," Zachary said. "I'll sleep in the other room." Zelda stepped into the cabin, feeling the warmth envelop her after the chill of the evening air. "This is very kind of you." Zachary placed her bundle on the table. "I'll bring in water so you can wash up. Supper won't be fancy, but it'll be hot." True to his word, Zachary brought in buckets of water, warming some on the stove for her bath. He showed her to a small bedroom with a narrow bed covered with a colorful quilt and a chest of drawers. "I'll leave you to it then," he said, backing out of the room. "Take your time." Alone for the first time in days, Zelda sank onto the edge of the bed, allowing herself a moment of relief. She hadn't expected such consideration from a man who'd sent for a wife like ordering supplies from a catalog. Stripping off her ruined dress, she washed away the dirt of travel, scrubbing until her skin was pink and raw, trying to remove all traces of her journey and what had happened along the way. When she emerged from the bedroom, dressed again in her tattered clothes, Zachary was at the stove stirring something that smelled wonderfully of beef and vegetables. "I've got stew," he said without turning around, "and there's bread from town. It's a day old but still good." "It smells wonderful," Zelda said, hovering uncertainly in the doorway. Zachary finally turned, his eyes widening slightly at the sight of her clean face and damp hair. "You look," he cleared his throat, "you must be hungry." They ate in relative silence, the unfamiliarity between them creating a cautious atmosphere. When they finished, Zelda insisted on washing the dishes, grateful for something familiar to do. "I have something for you," Zachary said when she'd finished. He disappeared into his bedroom and returned with a bundle wrapped in brown paper. "I ordered these when I sent for you, figured you might need clothes suited to ranch life." Zelda unwrapped the package to find 2 simple cotton dresses, a warm shawl, and undergarments. "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll accept them," Zachary replied. "It gets cold here faster than you might expect." That night, lying in the unfamiliar bed, Zelda listened to the sounds of the prairie through the small window, the distant howl of coyotes, the whisper of wind through grass. So different from the crowded boarding house where she'd lived after her parents' deaths, working her fingers to the bone as a seamstress, until the opportunity to become a mail-order bride had seemed like salvation. Morning came with the crow of a rooster and the smell of coffee. Zelda dressed quickly in one of the new dresses, a practical blue calico that fit her surprisingly well, and ventured into the main room. Zachary was already dressed for work, his hat on the table beside him. "Good morning," he said, pouring her a cup of coffee. "Sleep well." "Yes, thank you," she lied, not wanting to admit how strange it felt to sleep in a quiet room alone. "I've got to tend to the cattle today," Zachary explained. "You're welcome to explore the ranch, but be careful if you go beyond the yard. There's a rifle over the door if you need it." After he left, Zelda spent the morning exploring the cabin. Despite its simple furnishings, it was clean and well organized. The pantry was stocked with basics: flour, sugar, coffee, and preserves. In one corner of the main room, she discovered a bookshelf with a dozen well-worn volumes. She ran her fingers along their spines, surprised to find poetry among the practical guides to ranching and animal husbandry. By midday, Zelda had swept the floors, dusted the furniture, and was considering what to prepare for the evening meal when a knock at the door startled her. Cautiously, she opened it to find a woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair pulled into a severe bun. "So you're the mail-order bride," the woman said, assessing Zelda with keen eyes. "I'm Martha Wilkins. My husband and I run the neighboring ranch." "Zelda Armstrong," she replied, opening the door wider. "Would you like to come in?" Martha entered, her gaze sweeping the cabin. "You've cleaned up the place already. Good. Zachary keeps it tidy enough for a bachelor, but a woman's touch makes a difference." Over coffee, Martha explained that she'd come to check on the new arrival and bring a welcome gift: a basket containing fresh eggs, a jar of honey, and a loaf of bread. "Zachary's a good man," Martha said as she prepared to leave. "Quiet but solid." "His father was the same way before the fever took him 3 years ago." "You knew his family?" Zelda asked. "Everyone knows everyone out here," Martha replied. "Zachary's mother died when he was just a boy. His father raised him alone, taught him everything about ranching and respect." She paused at the door. "He deserves happiness, that one, more than most." After Martha left, Zelda found herself thinking about Zachary's past. His letters had mentioned little about his family, focusing instead on practical matters of the ranch and what life would be like for her there. When Zachary returned in the late afternoon, he found Zelda kneading dough at the table, the cabin filled with the aroma of a stew simmering on the stove. "You've been busy," he observed, hanging his hat by the door. "Your neighbor, Mrs. Wilkins, stopped by," Zelda explained. "She brought eggs and honey. Martha's a good woman, nosy but good-hearted." Zachary washed his hands in the basin. "I hope she didn't overwhelm you with questions." "Not at all. She was very kind." Zelda shaped the dough into a loaf and set it aside to rise. "She told me a little about your father." Zachary's expression softened. "Pa was the best man I ever knew, built this place from nothing." He looked around the cabin as if seeing his father's handiwork anew. "He would have liked you." The next few days settled into a rhythm. Zachary worked from dawn until dusk, tending the cattle, repairing fences, and preparing the ranch for the coming winter. Zelda found her place in the domestic sphere, cooking meals, mending clothes, and making the cabin more comfortable with small touches: wildflowers in a jar on the table, the quilt from her bed draped over a chair that had become her favorite spot for reading in the evenings. They shared meals and conversation, cautiously learning about each other. Zachary spoke of his dreams for the ranch, expanding the herd, building a larger barn. Zelda told him about growing up in Philadelphia, the daughter of a schoolteacher and a seamstress, until consumption had claimed them both within months of each other. "Is that when you decided to become a mail-order bride?" Zachary asked one evening as they sat by the fire, the autumn wind howling outside. Zelda stared into the flames, remembering the desperation that had driven her decision. "After my parents died, I had nowhere to go. I took work as a seamstress, but the pay was poor and the conditions were worse." She hesitated. "When I saw your advertisement, it seemed like Providence. And now," Zachary's voice was quiet, "do you regret your choice?" Zelda looked up, meeting his eyes. "No," she said truthfully. "I don't." As the days passed, Zelda began to notice small changes in their interactions. Zachary's hand would linger when passing her a dish at dinner. Their eyes would meet across the room, holding for a moment longer than necessary. She found herself watching him as he worked in the yard, admiring the strength in his shoulders and the gentleness with which he handled the animals. One morning, nearly 2 weeks after her arrival, Zelda was hanging laundry on the line when she heard the sound of approaching horses. Shading her eyes against the sun, she saw 3 riders approaching, rough-looking men whose appearance sent a chill down her spine. She hurried inside, grabbing the rifle from above the door just as the men reined in their horses in the yard. "Hello, the house," one called. "Anyone home?" Zelda stood in the doorway, the rifle visible but not raised. "Can I help you?" The leader, a man with a scar running down one cheek, smiled unpleasantly. "Just looking for water for our horses, madam. Long ride ahead." Something about his voice triggered a memory: the stagecoach, the robbery, the hands that had ripped her trunk from her grasp and struck her when she protested. Her grip on the rifle tightened. "The well is over there," she said, pointing with her free hand. "Help yourselves, then be on your way." The men exchanged glances. "Mighty unwelcoming for a lady alone," the scarred man said. "Your husband around?" Before Zelda could answer, the sound of a horse approaching from the pasture caught their attention. Zachary rode into view, his expression hardening when he saw the strangers. "Afternoon, gentlemen," he said, dismounting smoothly. "Something I can help you with." The tension was palpable as Zachary moved to stand beside Zelda, his hand resting casually near the pistol at his hip. "Just passing through," the scarred man said, his demeanor changing subtly. "Your wife was kind enough to offer water for our horses." "Much obliged," Zachary replied. "Water's free for honest men. Help yourselves and move on." The men filled their canteens and watered their horses, but their eyes kept straying to the cabin, assessing. When they finally rode away, Zelda's legs nearly gave out from relief. "You know them?" Zachary asked once they were alone. "I think they were the ones who robbed the stagecoach," she admitted. The one with the scar, his voice was familiar. Zachary's expression darkened. "Did they hurt you?" Zelda touched her cheek where the bruise had faded. "One of them struck me when I tried to keep my trunk." Zachary's jaw tightened. "I'll ride to town tomorrow, let the sheriff know they're in the area." He looked at the rifle still in her hands. "You know how to use that. My father taught me," she said, "though I've never had to shoot at a person." "Let's hope you never have to," Zachary replied. "But I'm glad you know how." That night, a storm rolled in from the mountains, bringing thunder that shook the cabin and lightning that illuminated the room in brief, harsh flashes. Unable to sleep, Zelda wrapped her shawl around her shoulders and ventured into the main room. Zachary was already there, stoking the fire. "Storm wake you?" he asked. She nodded, moving closer to the warmth. "I've never heard thunder so loud." "Mountain storms are fierce," Zachary agreed, "but the rain is good for the land." They sat side by side on the small sofa, listening to the rain pound against the roof. In the firelight, Zelda could see the worry lines around Zachary's eyes. "You're thinking about those men," she observed. "I don't like that they found the ranch," he admitted. "Most travelers stick to the main road. You think they followed me?" The thought made her shiver despite the fire's warmth. "I don't know," Zachary said honestly, "but I won't let any harm come to you, not again." The sincerity in his voice moved her. Without thinking, Zelda reached out and placed her hand over his. "Thank you for everything you've done for me, Zachary, for taking me in when I arrived with nothing." Zachary turned his hand beneath hers, their fingers interlacing. "You didn't arrive with nothing, Zelda, you brought hope." Their eyes met in the flickering light, and Zelda felt something shift between them, the cautious friendship blossoming into something deeper. The next day, Zachary rode to town to speak with the sheriff, leaving Zelda alone with strict instructions to keep the rifle close and stay alert. She spent the day cleaning and baking, trying to keep her mind occupied, but her thoughts kept returning to the scarred man and his companions, and to the feeling of Zachary's hand holding hers in the firelight. When Zachary returned that afternoon, his expression was grim. "Sheriff says there's been reports of a gang working the stagecoach lines. 3 men matching their description robbed a coach near Laramie last month." "Did he know them?" Zelda asked. "He thinks the scarred one might be Jack Harmon. Used to ride with the Cassidy gang before branching out on his own." Zachary hung his hat by the door. "Sheriff sending wires to neighboring towns. Wants me to come back in a few days to see if there's news." That night at dinner, Zachary seemed distracted, pushing food around his plate rather than eating. Finally, he set down his fork. "The preacher's due in town day after tomorrow," he said. "I was thinking we might postpone the wedding, given everything that's happened." Zelda felt a surprising pang of disappointment. "If that's what you want." "It's not about what I want," Zachary replied. "It's about giving you time to be sure. I don't want you to feel trapped into a decision because of circumstances." "What if I am sure?" The words slipped out before she could reconsider them. Zachary looked up, surprise and hope mingling in his expression. "Are you?" Zelda nodded, suddenly certain. "These past weeks have shown me the kind of man you are, Zachary. Kind, honorable, hardworking. I couldn't ask for a better husband." The smile that spread across his face transformed him. "I'll ride to town tomorrow and make sure the preacher knows we're coming." The day before the wedding, Martha Wilkins arrived with a beautiful cream-colored dress, her own wedding dress. She explained, altered to fit Zelda. "Can't have you getting married in calico," Martha insisted. "Not when Zachary's been waiting his whole life for the right woman." "Has he?" Zelda asked, running her fingers over the delicate fabric. "Waited, I mean," Martha's expression softened. "That boy turned down more than one local girl who set her cap for him. Said he was waiting for someone who'd see the ranch as a home, not just a means to an end." The morning of the wedding dawned clear and bright. Zachary had left at first light, saying it was bad luck to see the bride before the ceremony. Martha arrived to help Zelda dress, her practical hands making quick work of buttons and laces. "You look beautiful," Martha declared when they finished. "Like you were made for this place." The ride to town was peaceful, the mountains standing sentinel in the distance. the prairie grass golden in the autumn sun. Zelda thought about how different this journey was from her arrival just weeks ago, no longer afraid, no longer alone. The small church in Cottonwood Springs was already filled with people when they arrived, neighboring ranchers, townspeople, all curious to see Zachary Davis's mail-order bride. Zachary stood at the altar, clean-shaven and dressed in his Sunday best, his eyes lighting up when she entered. The ceremony was simple but heartfelt. When the preacher pronounced them husband and wife, Zachary's kiss was gentle, a promise of things to come. The celebration afterward was held at the town's only hotel, with food and drink flowing freely. Zachary kept Zelda close, his hand rarely leaving hers as they accepted congratulations from well-wishers. "Mrs. Davis," the sheriff said, approaching with a smile. "Welcome to our community." "Thank you, Sheriff," Zelda replied. "Any news of those men?" The sheriff's expression turned serious. "Nothing concrete, but there have been no more robberies reported. They might have moved on." As the celebration continued, Zelda noticed a man standing alone by the door, watching the proceedings with an unreadable expression. Something about him seemed familiar. "Zachary," she whispered, "who is that man by the door?" Zachary followed her gaze, his body tensing slightly. "That's Frank Harmon, Jack's brother, owns the livery stable here in town." He guided her to a quieter corner. "Frank's an honest man, unlike his brother. Served in the war, came back changed but decent." The sun was setting when they finally left the celebration, climbing into the wagon for the ride back to the ranch. The air had cooled and Zachary wrapped a blanket around Zelda's shoulders. "Happy, Mrs. Davis?" he asked as they left town behind. "Very," she replied, leaning against his solid warmth. "Though I can't help worrying about Jack Harmon and his men." "The sheriff will handle it," Zachary assured her. "Our job now is to build our life together." They were halfway home when Zelda noticed dust on the horizon, riders approaching fast from the direction of the ranch. Zachary saw them too, slowing the wagon and reaching for his rifle. "Get down," he ordered, helping her to the floor of the wagon. "Stay hidden." 3 riders came into view, Jack Harmon and his men. They spread out, blocking the road ahead. "Evening, Davis," Harmon called. "Heard you got married today. Congratulations." "What do you want, Harmon?" Zachary's voice was steady, but Zelda could feel the tension in him. "Just a friendly visit," Harmon replied, though his tone was anything but friendly. "Thought I'd check on the missus. She and I had a brief acquaintance on the stagecoach." Zelda felt a chill run through her at the memory of his hands on her trunk, the sting of his blow. "You robbed her and struck her," Zachary said coldly. "That's not an acquaintance I'd be proud of." Harmon laughed. "She was carrying some interesting items, letters that suggested a wealthy husband waiting in Wyoming territory." His eyes narrowed. "Imagine my surprise when I tracked her here and found a small-time rancher instead." "You've been watching us," Zelda realized, sitting up despite Zachary's warning. "Smart lady," Harmon acknowledged. "Now here's how this will play out. You're going to hand over whatever money and valuables you got as wedding gifts today, and we'll be on our way. And if we refuse," Zachary's hand inched toward his holster, "then your bride becomes a widow on her wedding day," Harmon said simply. What happened next unfolded in a blur. As Harmon reached for his gun, a shot rang out, not from Zachary but from the ridge behind them. One of Harmon's men fell from his horse. Before the others could react, more shots followed. "Ambush," Harmon shouted, wheeling his horse around. Riders appeared on the ridge, the sheriff and several men, including Frank Harmon. "Drop your weapons, Jack," Frank called to his brother. "It's over." A furious shootout ensued. Zachary pulled Zelda down, shielding her with his body as bullets flew overhead. When the gunfire finally ceased, Jack Harmon and his remaining man were in custody, both wounded but alive. "You all right?" the sheriff asked, riding down to the wagon. "We're unharmed," Zachary confirmed, helping Zelda to sit up. "How did you know?" "Frank came to me after the wedding," the sheriff explained, nodding toward the man who hung back from the group. "Said his brother was planning something. We've been tracking them since they left town." Frank approached cautiously. "I'm sorry for what my brother did, madam," he said to Zelda. "He hasn't been right since the war." "Thank you for the warning," she replied. "You saved our lives." The journey home continued under escort from the sheriff, the night falling around them like a blanket. When they finally reached the ranch, Zachary helped Zelda down from the wagon with gentle hands. "Not exactly how I planned our wedding day to end," he said as they stood before the cabin. "It's perfect," Zelda replied, looking up at the stars scattered across the vast Wyoming sky. "We're here, we're safe, and we're together." Zachary smiled, then swept her into his arms, carrying her across the threshold into their home. "Welcome home, Mrs. Davis," he whispered, kicking the door shut behind them. In the months that followed, Zelda and Zachary built their life together on the strength of trust and growing love. The winter came harsh and unforgiving, but inside the cabin, warmth and happiness flourished. Zachary expanded the ranch, adding more cattle and improving the barn. Zelda planted a garden and learned the rhythms of ranch life. When spring arrived, bringing wildflowers and new calves, Zelda shared news of her own a child would arrive by harvest time. Zachary's joy was boundless, his gentle hands cradling her still flat stomach with wonder. Jack Harmon and his gang were tried and sentenced to years in territorial prison. Their days of terrorizing travelers ended. Frank Harmon became a friend, visiting occasionally and bringing books for Zelda from his travels. On their first anniversary, as they sat on the porch watching the sunset paint the mountains in gold and purple, Zachary took Zelda's hand in his. "When you stepped off that stagecoach in rags," he said softly, "I knew you were the bravest person I'd ever seen." "I was terrified," Zelda admitted. "Afraid you'd send me away." "Never," Zachary vowed. "From the moment I saw you, I knew you belonged here, with me." Inside the cabin, the fire crackled in the hearth, dinner waited on the table, and the cradle Zachary had carved stood ready in the corner of their bedroom. The past was behind them, the door firmly closed. Ahead lay a future they would build together, one day at a time, on the foundation of a love that had begun with a mail-order bride in rags and a cowboy with enough heart to see beyond appearances to the promise of what could be.